It is, I think it's July 31st today, and I am starting a new quilting project, so I thought I would periodically show some steps to it, throw together a little vlog. The pattern I'm going to use is called Blue Lagoon, and it is in the book Jelly Roll Quilts by Pam and Nicky Lintott. I already broke open my jelly roll that I'm using, which is called Wagon, and I'm going to start sewing the 2.5-inch strips together. You have to divide it, the lights and darks. There weren't enough lights in this. It's mostly a dark one, so I pulled some strips from my Kansas Troubles and some background colors. So I'm going to start sewing these together. I usually, or most of the time, I use a leader and I throw them in here. These are just scraps of fabric that, I don't have any good ones in here now, I guess. Oh, here they are. These are scraps of fabric from other projects, and it's a leader for the strip so that you don't have a thread bunching up or distorting it. And I have my 1/4-inch foot on there. This actually has a selvage still on it, which will be cut off. And then I'm going to check my, yeah, that was wrong. Okay, so my needle position's in the middle, and I'm just on a straight thing here. I'm not pinning these, I generally do, but I'm just going to try it, see how it goes without pinning. So far, so good. So what I'm going to do is sew a bunch of these together, and then I'm going to cut them and make 4 patches out of them. So I'll continue to do that, and I'll check back with you then. I'm continuing to sew these strips together, and I just wanted to share a little tip. I have some laid out over there, and these are all going to be cut into 2.5-inch pieces, and then I have to re-sew these. Standing over, I don't have a countertop high cutting area, so mine is a regular size table, and bending over and doing that can get tedious, and it just breaks it up a little bit. That I sew a couple of these, and then I cut some, and then I sew some, and I cut some, and I kind of like doing that a little bit. And then another tip is to use paper plates to separate your pieces. I saw this tip in a pattern, and I use it on almost every quilt, and by the time I get all these done, I'll have 14 plates stacked up. It saves space, and it just keeps things organized. So I think I'm about halfway on these now. And I'm doing okay not pinning it too. So I think my machine is a Brother CS6000i, and it's a very inexpensive, fantastic machine. Highly recommend it. And one of the things I like is that it has a speed control, so that I have it on the medium one now, and no matter, I can push the pedal all the way down and it will not go faster than that speed. And then it has a slow, which I very seldom use, and then it has a super fast one, which is too fast for most things, I think. So I generally am on the medium, but that way I can push the pedal all the way down and I have a nice even stitching, because your tension isn't as good if you change the, it seemed like it, your tension is not as good if you vary the speed too much. So now I'm chain piecing some of these, so I'm just going to leave that in, excuse me. There. And then I've matched them up. I think these look pretty good together. It'll all be jumbled up in the end anyway. So put these 2 right sides together, and then I'll just feed that right. So we'll be pieced with that one. Oops, it slipped out a little bit. All right. Another thing I really like about this machine, and it might be a standard thing on many new machines, but sorry, you get my you get my backside there. But for one thing, I just ran out of bobbin thread, but I knew it was coming because the bobbin loads so that it's flat here and there's a clear cover over it, so you can easily see when your bobbin is getting low. And then I have some preloaded bobbins. This one isn't very full, but I'm going to go ahead and use it anyway. And it's so easy to get the bobbin loaded, and then you can see what's going on. I haven't had very many problems at all with bobbin snarling or anything. It's just fantastic. And then that's how quick it is. All I have to do now is bring the bobbin thread up. And I'm using a off-white thread. I find that 90% of my quilting can be done with a cream color thread. So, and I am absolutely loving this fabric collection. Yeah, I went ahead and did several while my ironing was. The colors are just so pretty, and you'll be seeing them later, so I won't show you now. But oh, it's beautiful. And I didn't realize the designer of the fabric is actually Kim Diehl, and I reviewed one of her books in a video episode a couple episodes back. She co-authored a book with Lori Baker, who attends my retreats and gave me the book. So I didn't realize that when I bought this beautiful fabric. So now over to the ironing board. Okay, I have sewn all of the 2.5-inch strips together, the 14, not all of them because some have to be in reserve, but 14 lights and 14 darks. There weren't a lot of really true lights, like this one was a true light, but in some of them I just had to go with the kind of the contrast and figure, well, it's going to just have to be light enough. So then you take these have been pressed, the seams have been set, and then they've been pressed open, and I pressed to the dark side. So the way I use the mat, and usually I do this in my other room where I have a longer mat, but the lighting is even worse in there. So I'll trim this off on a line here so that there's no, get rid of the selvage there. And then that one's in just a little, so I'm going to pull it. And then sometimes I line it up with the seam so that the seam is on 7 here, and then you can actually fold this back and make sure that it's on. I'm not sure if this is really standard procedure or not. This is what I do, and it seems to work out. So then 1, 2, and a half. So the 1/2-inch mark is there. Unfortunately, on this map, there's not really a 1/2-inch mark, but I'm pretty good at eyeballing that. So 1, 2, and a half. And there's one there. And then, since I already have the half there, I'm just going to go to a solid line and cut that. And so on down the line. And I don't really need to move it unless I see that there's a little gap between the line, and I'd rather cut these just a tad big than too small. And you're supposed to be able to get 16 out of each strip, and I've actually gotten 17 out of a couple of them, so that gives me a little bit extra. Okay, so there's the half, and here's the line. So we'll go all the way down this one, and this is where the paper plates come in, because then I put all of one kind on a paper plate, and then I can just easily count how many sets I've done. And I use these paper plates over and over and over. I think it's one of the best tips I've ever found for quilting is to use paper plates. Just the cheap white paper plates to keep your pieces straight. And I think I'm going to have to change the blade on my cutter fairly soon. And this is the slide lock, quilter slide lock. American made, quilter tested. You can find it at quiltersslidelock.com. I got mine from Mass Drop. Mass Drop is a little bit like Groupon, only there are products there, and I'm only signed up for the quilting things, and I have bought a number of things there. So I'm going to go ahead and finish these, and then we'll start making 4 patches. And I have a big decision to make on that, so I'll be talking through that. 1, 2.5. Always close up your blade. I had a quilting teacher for the first real quilting class I took, and she was real strict about that, and it got me in a good habit, and I try to be consistent with it. Okay, that's good for now, I think. So it's the next day in the I think I've done quite a bit in about 24 hours on this, because I finished sewing all of the strips together, the 14 times 2, so they're 28 strips that are sewn together, so there are 14 pairs here, and I have them organized on my plates. Now I have a decision to make, because I was originally thinking that I would pair a like piece to a like piece and make the 4 patch like this, but I think the pattern actually just jumbles everything up. So in other words, instead of having something like this, I would have, so I still have dark dark and light light relatively. I don't even like that combination, but you can't think about it too much or it gets paralyzing. But here's another one. So I think it's a little more interesting to mix them. And in a way, I'm also thinking that there's not a lot of room for error in this pattern. If I have a messed up block and I'm matching it like this one, I only have so many of those. And so then I would have to get creative, I think. So the random mixing, and oh, some of these are just, all of the fabrics I think are gorgeous, and you can put just about anything together and it looks good to me in this collection. I am so excited about the project. I wasn't familiar with any of these fabrics, so when I opened up that Jelly Roll, and I don't think I really portrayed that very well or expressed it yesterday, that it is so exciting to open up a Jelly Roll and see all the different fabrics in there, and there are just so many great combinations. I love this green and the black, or I don't know if that's, I think that's purple actually. And look at this. Oh my goodness. This, pairing it off with something, I mean, so much fun. So I'm going to sew some together. I think I've decided to do the random. I might take each one and do a block where they match, and then I'll mix up all the rest and then throw them in that way, because yeah, I'm going to have a ball doing that. There's more cutting to do. I still have to cut 132 2-inch strips from some other, or 2-inch pieces, 2.5-inch pieces from the other ones, and they're left over. So that'll be, I'll mix that in so I don't get too tired cutting. I'll sew some and then cut some. And these can be done chain piecing, so I'll pin a bunch of them together and then do some chain piecing. I have sewn the first batch of 4 patches together, and I'm going to set the seams and then press them. This is my leader, so I can reuse that. I reuse them sometimes quite a bit, but I do like to press these before clipping them apart, because it seems like it saves time. So when you set the seams, you just put the iron down and press. At this point, I generally don't use any steam or starching spray. Okay, so I have pressed all these to set the seams, and now I'm opening up the block and pressing it open. And they're coming out great. I will square these up, but for right now, I'm kind of impressed with my accuracy, because that is not my forte. Fort is the proper pronunciation. I recently learned. I mean, I learned it on Facebook. But anyway, if you say fort, nobody would know what you were. They think you would be the one that would be wrong. So anyway, but don't you just love these fabrics? They are so gorgeous, and I'm more excited than ever. And what I do really love about them is that they look like fall, but they don't scream fall. They're not leaves and pumpkins and that sort of thing. But I think it definitely has a fall vibe to it. And I'm using my Rowenta here. No steam, just a hot iron and a little bit of spray starch is all I'm using on this, because I recently learned that steam can actually distort your. Don't you love that? Look at that. I'm so crazy about this fabric line. I'm really glad. You know, I just said this earlier, but I'm really glad that I wasn't already familiar with a lot of the fabrics, because it really is like falling in love with it and being on a fabric color high. I just have a couple more. I know I would not be quilting if it weren't for jelly rolls and charm packs and layer cakes, because I just love the variety. I am not interested in a quilt that would be just 2 or 3 fabrics. And I think that was why I never got onto it earlier, because I love the scrappiness of having all these different fabrics. I'm probably doing stuff wrong, so if you are a quilter and you know that, you can feel free to tell me, because I'm still learning a lot, but I feel like I've made a lot of progress. And I have to say, all these 4 patches are coming out really great. The points are all in the center and meet up really nicely. That one's just like a thread off, but I wouldn't worry about that. It's actually the only one that's been off at all, so I'm pretty proud of it. Okay, so I'm going to go get some random matches made, and I'll keep laying these out, and the next time you see it, I'll probably have quite a few of them done, so it'll be exciting. Well, I thought of something I wanted to share, so I'm back before I thought I would. I am putting these together with, not really, I don't think you could call it random, but the way I'm doing it is I take a plate of 16, well now they're 15 since actually 14 of each one, because I matched each with its own. And then I just go along to each plate and match. So I'll match one of these with all of these. And then I'll take another one and match, and maybe, I mean, I think that's one way to get what might be like a random. But what I wanted to show here is that I ran across this one that seems just a little bit narrow. And so I marked it S for being small. So when I come to this, I will try to maybe make the seam just a little bit, and that's with a fabric marking pen, so that it'll come right off with water. So I don't know if I don't know if that's standard. It's probably not standard procedure. So then I just lay the ones that I'm going to chain piece like this. So I just matched one of these with that one, and now I'm over here. And what is so, what is so surprising is that I'll think, oh, these two aren't going to go together. But then when I get them together, I think I like it. I mean, it's crazy, but it does. It's amazing what the colors do when they're with one another. Another way that I will check my chain piecing is there's the line of stitching on this side, and here's the line of stitching on this side. And so if I stick a pin in the line of stitching here, it should come out at the line of stitching on the other side, and it does. And sometimes I pin these actually twice. I'll pin at the top and the bottom. And then the other thing is, this one's an anomaly, but I try to piece it or lay it out so that the seam that's pressed that way is going to be on top, because that's the easy one. If the one on the bottom is going with the flow, then it's less likely to get turned the wrong way, if that makes any sense, because it'll be fed through the machine this way. And so this one, if it were on the bottom, would be likely to get turned down. And I don't worry about that too much if it happens. I just kind of go on with it. So now I have this one. I'm going to go over there because I haven't done that one yet. And I still have a stack here that I haven't used. So if I come across a really bad combination, I might avoid it. But so far, it's good. Okay, I've seen enough of that, I think. Well, this is day 3 on the quilt, and I'm making great progress. I have most of the blocks put together, and they're in stacks over here. The little pink Post-its are the number in each stack. So when I was doing that, I would take one tray, whichever one had the most on it at the time, and then I would put all the other trays out, and then I would pick this up and take this one, pin it on it. Then I would move this over here. And the next one I would take another plate and just keep, as I use them, I would turn them over. But it ended up that, for whatever reason, I have an odd number on a lot of these. And it might be because on the long strips I might have gotten an extra several ones, but I don't see how I could have gotten that many. So anyway, what I decided to do, there were 3 strips left over after all the cutting, and I decided to put 2 strips together and have something new to match up. So all of these probably will be matched with this one. Now this is the dark of these, so it would go like this. And so once I get these done, I really will be, let's see, that will go like that. So I think it'll look good, and I love this orange and green combination. The other thing was that I went to the quilt shop and got the fabric for my sashing and border. And it's a neutral with a really small tone-on-tone floral print. I'll get a still photo so you can see it. So from a distance, it looks fairly plain. I mean, you can see it even here, but it adds a little interest, I think, and I really, really like it. The other thing is that I'm striving for accuracy on my sewing. So I've taken out, or picked out the sewing on 4 squares, and this will be my 5th one. It's not that far off, but the point is not, it's not great. And I think the problem is actually that this one is a little too big. So I am going to take it out and move it. I mean, it's not much, but there is a lot of piecing in this, and if one block is off, it can really mess everything up. I've had to really try try to embrace the perfectionism that is needed for quilting, because if things aren't really straight and perfect, then you do run into trouble. And it's one of those things that the trouble can be compounded. Okay, a couple of things I just wanted to add in here. I picked out the one that was a little bit off, and I repinned it. And I just wanted to say that accuracy is so important with quilting, and I kind of learned that the hard way when I was doing the log cabin star, because log cabin is one of the most well-known quilting patterns, and it's not difficult to do, but it's kind of difficult to do it well. And if the pieces are a little bit off and you're going around, it just gets worse. And so I pinned that one the wrong way. I'm trying to pin these so the seam, the up seam is on top, and that way you can make sure it doesn't get folded down. So I'm just matching these up. So I wanted to say that. And then another lesson I learned the hard way, and I've never really seen anybody talk about this, is that when you're stitching and you finish your sample here, and if you use the cutter on your machine, hold it by both hands and pull it down like that. Don't just yank it. I thought, oh, well, I should use that more because it wastes time to get the scissors and trim. But I found that I was just kind of, it's with chain piecing, and I was just yanking those through. And then I would find that the edge of the seam had actually come undone a little bit, and I'm pretty sure it was from that. So I'm careful if I use my cutter on the machine, but mostly I have this new pair of scissors, which I'll talk about on a regular episode, and I just make sure that these stay by the machine, and that way I'm okay with that. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch the rest of these, and then we'll see what comes up next. Well, it's the evening of day 3, and I have all the cutting done. I cut the pieces for the background. I cut the borders, and I started pinning some of the background pieces to the smaller squares. What I have to do now, I think, is square up all of these 4-patch, and there are 120 of them, so this is going to take a while. And I'm using a creative grid. This is my favorite type of ruler and square. I didn't realize when I started getting quilting supplies that it would be a good idea to probably get the same brand. But I mean, I think it's important to try different brands too, but I find the creative grid the best. So I find the center, which is 2 1/4 on this. The square has to measure 4 1/2, and they're a little big. I knew they would be, and I thought maybe I could go with it, but I think it would really mess me up later on, so it just has to be done. Because this is kind of tedious after a while, I do 10 or 15 or whatever, and then I'll go do something else, because I think that accuracy starts waning when you get tired of doing it. So I'll do these, then I'll go stitch some things, and I'll find some other things to do. I still have plenty to do. So that is tonight's task, and we'll see how far I get. Hello, it's been about 4 days since I worked on my quilt. I did some squaring up last week. I've been at Stitches Midwest for 4 days. And one of the tips I'd like to share is that whenever I'm cleaning up my project and know that I'm going to be away from it, or just after any quilting session, I take a little time to get something ready to get started on right when I get back. It really helps the momentum to know that right now I can just sit down and start chain piecing these four square blocks that I have pinned the sashing on. Those are ready to go, and I also know that I have to I have to square off all those blocks over there. I also label the plates. Now this one, these are the squared off blocks, and it says squared, already squared here. These are pieces that are extra or that I need to redo the block because it's off, and it says extras and redos. So sometimes you think you're not going to be away a long time, and then, I mean, I knew I was going to be gone for 4 days, but sometimes you step away from a project and you don't realize that you're going to be gone for a long time, and then you don't have to come back and try to figure it out. This is, of course, if you have a dedicated space. It doesn't work probably if you're doing your work on a dining room table. The other thing is, whenever I shut down everything, I put this post-it note right here underneath the presser foot, because when my machine is turned off and I turn on the light and the power, the needle shifts over to the left position. That's the default, unfortunately. So then I have to put it to center with just one click. But if I forget, the needle will break, and or at least jam and probably bend. So everything's all set to go. The other thing is, I like to have a full bobbin, or at least a partly, pretty full bobbin, so that I don't have to stop and wind or change a bobbin right away. So those are just a couple of tips that can help get your momentum going and help you keep moving on a project. And now I'm going to do some work on the quilt. I'm coming down the home stretch on my squaring blocks. And I just wanted to say a couple of things about that. I mentioned the Creative Grid. And that is a brand I really like. It has these little rough patches on the underside so that it doesn't slip as much. It still will slip, though. I think they all will do that. But you need to have a grid block that's bigger than the size that you're cutting to. Here's a 4-inch block that I actually got for knitting, because it's a good way to measure your gauge. So it's only 4 inches across, and I'm trimming to 4.5, so I can't really use this to trim to 4.5. So I would say if you're starting out quilting, just wait until you know what size you need for your first project and buy one. I think a medium size like this, and then maybe one around 12.5 inches is probably going to cover most of the projects that you have. You don't have to have one that's the exact size of the square. And there are many tutorials online. I think that Creative Grids actually has their own, so I don't have the setup to show you exactly how to do it, but I'll talk through it anyway. So my squares need to be 2.5 inches, so 4.5 inches. So the center point is at 2.25, and you have to make sure that you're using the correct side of your grid as well. So there's 2.25, and I try to line it up along the center seam, the center line there, to make sure that's horizontal, and then look to see that I have at least 4.5 on the outside of the 4.5, or have some fabric on the outside of the 4.5 line. Then put your hand down. Whoops, I just moved it. Put your hand like this and press down. And I just unlocked or taken the cover off my rotary cutter, and then you press this way and then across. And then I do what you're probably not supposed to do, and I kind of lift the fabric away, and then I immediately close the cover on my rotary cutter. And then you know that these two are square, so then when you turn it around, you can actually line up your 4.5 on those lines, and then check the center to make sure that 2.25 is in the center the lines go across. And then, well, I was abruptly cut off because my camera battery ran out, but I wanted to share a couple more things. Here's a pile of some of the cut off parts from when I was squaring up the blocks. So you can see a lot of these are very small. There really isn't that much, but it is enough that it could totally mess up the alignment if you don't do it. And I don't believe I said why I like the creative grid. Maybe I did, but I'm going to repeat it then. I like that it has this rough part on the back, although it does slip occasionally. And I also said that it needs to be bigger than the piece that you're squaring off. It actually can be exactly the right size or bigger. It just can't be smaller. So these are 4.5-inch blocks. I could have, if they make them, I don't even know, they could have a 4.5-inch one, which would be fine, or anything greater than that. You can also use the removable tape, the highlighter tape, to mark a spot so you don't have to look as carefully when you're doing it. I'm going to take these off because I wasn't using them, and if you leave them on too long, they can leave a residue like I have here. So those were a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Oh, and also that all the different brands have different ways of, or have different markings, and that's why I think it's a good idea to stick with the same brand, because then you're accustomed to their way of measuring. So that's my opinion on that. I have now squared up all the blocks. I have a fair number of blocks that I need to redo, but it won't take that long to redo them. Some of them are just a little crooked, like this one. You can see it just kind of veers off here, and I don't know why this one's in here, but it must have measured funny for some reason. Some of these look okay, so I don't know. I will remeasure them and find out, but I'm making great progress, although we're going out of town tomorrow. We'll be gone for 5 days in North Carolina, so I won't be getting any quilting done then. Hi, I am back from North Carolina. It's been about 10 days since I last recorded. I did a little more work on the quilt before we left on our trip. That was about 10 days ago, a week ago. And then when I came back, I did some more. One day I pieced some more of these, and now I have more lined up. So what has happened is that I have run out of the background fabric. That neutral background fabric that I showed you, which just has a small tonal print on it. I have run out of these pieces for attaching to the squares and then to the little squares that will be between them. So I went to the quilt shop, and fortunately at Peddler's Way Quilt Company they can actually look up your previous purchases. And I had already looked on the shelf and I didn't find it, and it turns out they don't have any more. I knew that the bolt was low, so I was sort of prepared for that. I have gone through my scraps and gotten a few more here, but it's not enough for all of these. And the reason I'm running short is that, if you remember, I did introduce another fabric. So I have extra squares and I have extra of the other pieces, but I still want those. Now, I'm going to start piecing using my extras here. I have a lot of pieces that are too small to use, but I could piece these together and that would be fine. But I also have the borders cut, and the borders are 3.5 inches and strips. I'm hoping maybe I cut some extra borders accidentally. There's another one there, so there's quite a bit of border fabric. So there's actually plenty of fabric to do it, but then I just might need another border. In the pattern, the background fabric and the border fabric are the same, but that's not to say that I can't change it. And there certainly are enough fabrics that are similar to this, but not quite the same, that I could use for the border. The other thing I did, sorry, my chair's creaky, I need a new chair here. The other thing I did was I purchased a refill from my Mary Ellen's Best Press, and I wanted to tell you that the refills are available, so if you have the spray bottle, you don't have to keep buying the bottle. My shop also lets you refill a bottle for $6, but it turns out the price is almost the same as just buying it. So since I go through quite a bit of this, I went ahead and bought another bottle, so I'll be prepared. I also have gone through the reject pile, and I have a few more to do, but I have taken out several of these that need to be resewn, that were a little crooked, and that's kind of relaxing just to sit down and do that and then press them. They're ready to go. And then I'll get my machine going here. And as you can see, I have my reminder so that when I turn it on, and then I remember to switch the needle over. That way I don't end up with a broken needle. So I'm going to get sewing, and I'll be back with you in a little bit. Hello, it is Labor Day, and I'm really coming along. I'm dedicating almost the whole day today to quilting. My goal is to finish this quilt and get it sent off for finishing, well, my part of the finishing, and then I'll send it off to Nancy, who is Grace and Peace Quilting, before I go to the main retreat. So I still have some piecing to do, but I have quite a lot of it done. I think I'm going to end this as part one, and then I'll record some of the bigger piecing together and then the finished quilt. So let me just show you what I have here real quick. I have some of the long strips. I have all the long strips pieced together, but they each need one little more piece on them. There are 10 of those altogether. And then I have, step out of the frame. This is part of the other long pieces, and then I'll show you my design board. Walk over to the design board here. So this will give you an idea of what the quilt is going to look like. This will be up. So this way I can lay it out and make sure that I don't, for example, have two of the same just right. Not that that would be a huge deal, but as I piece them together, I've been trying to space out the various patterns and not have two of the same together. I'd say the only thing that bothers me about this collection is that the gingham are not all cut along the grain and print. I think that's actually, yeah, it's printed. So some of those look a little wonky, but they are cut straight. It's just that the strips were not straight on them. So this will give you an idea of what it's going to look like, and I'll have a part two coming soon. So it's taken me a little over a month so far. I started on July 30th, and I have been gone. We were in North Carolina. I went to Stitches, and so I feel pretty good about it. I think I'm doing pretty well. I have had some periods of a week or 5 or 6 days anyway where I have not done much on it, but I've tried to keep a steady pace. Now I'm seeing here, oh, I guess it's going to be okay. Didn't look like it was going to line up there. Okay, well, thanks so much for watching, and you'll be seeing part two soon.